This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by Head of Front-End Workflow and Imaging for Harbor Picture Company, Dexter Kong, whose work includes The Willow, The Nevers, and Andor, just to name a few. Welcome to the show, Dexter.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
I guess my first question is, can you tell me about this role of front-end workflow and imaging person? What does that involve?
Yeah, definitely. To break it down, so it's something that is across a few areas. The sort of primary focus for us is our software applications. So we have a platform which is called Anchor, which is a VFX pools application. So that's used across any production which is VFX heavy, and essentially what it's doing is rendering out the plates for the production and then automating that whole process and delivery. So it ends up being really handy for the VFX heavy shows like you mentioned in that list beforehand. But the other side of it is the workflow side of things. So I'm also across what we describe as front-end workflow. So that's kind of a bridge between dailies to DI to VFX. But essentially it covers all areas, but kind of the specialism from my side is that I've sort of come from a background which has come from set, but I've also got experience in post. So it bridges those gaps and just means that it's easier to communicate across departments.
So like the Anchor software, it's not so much a not like, I want to call it, I can't remember what the name of it. I think it was Shotgun, where it sort of helps keep you organized in your workflows. It's more like I guess, can you explain what Anchor does a bit more thoroughly?
Yeah, sure. So essentially what happens in the pools process with VFX is that the VFX editor will organize their shots in their timeline, and then when it comes to wanting to grab those plates for VFX, they'll submit an EDL through our platform, and then our platform will organize that media and then render the plate for them from the actual OCM, which we use that term, which is just the original camera media, and then it just delivers that to the necessary vendor. So sometimes on these bigger scale productions, you can have almost like 14 vendors going on globally. So you really need to automate that process. Otherwise, historically, if it's someone manually pulling those plates, you kind of need a team 24/7 on that just to be getting all those plates through.
Yeah.
I got into sound designing at a point when things were just developing. I was really fascinated by the idea that dialogue, effects, music were all components of the soundtrack to a film, which had never occurred to me before. What gets me excited is coming up with sound ideas that do match picture, but also is not just the equivalent of what you're seeing on screen. I'm Eugene Garrity, and this is my course on sound design.
So how did you end up, because you said you'd worked on set for a bit and done some posts. So how did you end up working as a front-end workflow / imaging person for Harbor? Like, what is your journey?
So my journey I'd actually describe it as a bit of a winding journey to where I got now. So I actually started in sort of more of an editing producer side of things in marketing for Discovery Networks. So I was actually across basically their Western Europe portfolios of shows, and that started my journey into kind of the editing and post side of things. And then from that, I kind of had this bit of an epiphany of thought. I was like, I actually really want to go back to more be film focused and concentrate on that. So I actually went and left and started back on set, and then I landed myself in some DIT roles on set, and then effectively built up that knowledge about cameras, etc., through that avenue. And then from that, I transitioned back into post because I saw this role, which was for, at the time, another application for Technicolor. And then basically from that, it kind of builds up, and you build up the workflow knowledge about the different disciplines. So you get to get a bit of knowledge about the VFX process, about DI, and then, like I said, with the front end knowledge as well, it kind of all binded together and created this workflow role for me in that business. And then the culmination is now what I've taken to Harbour, which is all the specialisms from those areas is combined into this one role now.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned sort of getting to know and learn the workflows. And one of the things that always frustrated me, at least like when I started, it was like I was right on the cusp of film and digital. And so there was like every week was like a new workflow for a while. But it's constantly evolving. Like I think about virtual production and how that sort of flipped things a bit, where a lot of stuff now happens at the head. So like, how do you keep on top of the new evolving workflows, especially with, like I think about Andor, and that's such a like the whole Star Wars sort of world is really pushing how we do things in VFX. So how do you stay on top of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think really, I think for anyone, you just never stop learning, really. You're constantly reading up on new workflows, you're reading up on new cameras. I really quite enjoy going into in depth with all the technical knowledge. So I will literally read the white papers when they come out about new cameras, new color spaces, new ways of processing things. One important thing, I guess, is that we're also looking for ways to standardize workflows and get color consistency in the pipeline. So that's the quite important thing. Is like you mentioned, is that now with these VFX heavy shows, we're really needing what's coming from set to match down the pipeline. Whereas before, I guess it was a bit more tolerance in terms of, oh, this color might not match or this framing might not match. Whereas now, ideally, we need to get it pixel accurate. We need to get the color matching exactly. So that's why I think more so this front end workflow role is more predominant these days, just because you need that gatekeeper at the start of the project rather than the end of it these days.
Now, what would you recommend to someone who's wanting to get, like, I know a few people who really, like you said, like to dive into the white pages and figure out how the technology works. So what would you recommend to those who wanted to get into this area of film?
I would say, curiosity is the best thing. Like I said, yeah, there's all the information is available online. That's the thing. There's all the manufacturers are fairly transparent and everything. And you've got groups, you've got the ACES work groups where you can literally join the forums, get into those discussions. I think these days it's good because it's basically the internet is just this wide open forum where you can learn or you can get advice on, the methods you need to do things or other practices. Even the best practitioners at the moment are still sort of in these forums as well from our side, just saying, hey, like this new camera format appeared. What do people think about, and, how the starting point is, can we work on that? And I think the other thing we do as a company with Harbour, which I think is great, is we do mind melds with other studios. So we'll actually, discuss generally, like maybe every month or so, workflows and best ways to do that. So I think the knowledge collaboration is a great thing. I think for people wanting to get into the workflow side of things, it's for me, it's mostly a case of just, asking questions, and people hopefully will be happy to answer those. I myself am like really happy if someone asks me a question, because I will absolutely, want to discuss things and get into it, but also enjoy those discussions too.
So what would you say, because we have a lot of young filmmakers who are just starting out watching these. So what would you say to them, what are some issues that people just starting out might not be aware of when they're developing their workflow for a project?
I think the one common thing is just simplicity of the workflow. I think that's actually quite a key thing with the VFX pipeline, is that we're really reliant on just things being simple and keeping grades ideally to like CDL grades, so there's no secondaries in the pipeline. The thing to understand, I guess, is that you can open Resolve, you can open any platform and do as many grades as possible. But in terms of actually passing that information through the chain, it becomes more difficult, obviously, the more complex those grades become. So actually the key to the bigger project is actually a more simplistic workflow, and that's quite an important thing, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned earlier that like you do these collaborations with other facilities or other places working in similar. How do you, because like I was working with someone on a VP like a virtual production project, and there was another company that was stepping in, and there was this sort of weird hesitation between the two companies because it's so new, the virtual production, they didn't know what they should share or could share. How do you break down those walls in the meetings to make sure everyone can advance the field and move things forward?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you definitely do come against hurdles where people do want to protect information for whatever reason. But I think through my experience, being open with these issues or being able to share and work on them together is a much better way forward. And through that, you can discover new ways or better ways of working. And I think that's something, again, that's good with Harbour, is that you got the color scientists like CJ and Matt who are basically like, look, we'll work within your boundaries, but we want to help this creative process. So we want to share this information. And I think that's a great way of working.
What would you say, like, was there ever a, like, because whenever I've worked on a project, there's always something that pops up in the last minute that you're like, oh, I wish I had known about that when we were starting the process. So is there, like, what would you say was one of your more difficult workflows to work on or to develop, but you've taken all that knowledge and now you can apply it to multiple workflows? And, is there something that you found really difficult but learned a lot from?
That is an interesting one. Yeah, I think in a broad sense, usually actually you find the sort of lower end projects are the more difficult ones to work on, just because people aren't quite used to that method of communication in terms of, hey, we've got this new camera that's coming up, or like you say, it comes up last minute. So the biggest difficulty is actually just the lack of communication most of the time. With other things, we like to get in there from the start, basically, and actually have a relation with the DIT on set and Dailies labs so that they can just reach out as things are going on. So in terms of the most difficult projects, I won't name check them directly, but it's usually the ones where they're pulling out like a GoPro, a Canon 5D, all these it's usually the non-standard cameras, but by way of how good the SDK is for that, and whether the actual debayering of that camera is the same across different platforms. That's usually our most problematic thing we come against.
Well, it's funny that you would say that, because I remember just when Red first came out, when the Red camera, and they were having issues with overheating and like different problems, and then we were on a project and they were like, oh yeah, someone had a Red camera, and so we stuck it in, and you're like, we haven't done the workflow for this. Like, we don't know, we have to figure out how to get it into the system now. But
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And even Red themselves, when they first came out, they had all the different color spaces, there was so much choice, and then now they've gone back to that more simplistic workflow again of, unifying it to log 3G10 red white gamut. So yeah, it always starts off like, give everyone all the options available, give them the creative choice, and then as you scale up, it's more about the simplicity, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
That is a fantastic question.
It's my gotcha question. We're gonna post it everywhere on the internet.
Yeah, I think at the moment for us, our guilty pleasure is watching You at the moment. You, which
Not
is on
me,
Netflix.
but like the show You.
No, yeah. Yeah, that always happens. Yeah, but it's just a fantastic show. It's just so
Yeah, it's a
well
great show.
written. It's just so simple, and who doesn't love a anti-hero, I guess.
Mhm.
And then I guess in terms of the guilty pleasure for a movie, I'm a big fan of the Mighty Duck series. This is
That's a
quite
great
a
series. That's a great series. Did you watch the Disney reboot for the TV show?
I did. I loved it. I don't know if you saw it as well, but it had all the heart there still.
Yeah, well, the first season, the second season, I haven't really I got through a couple episodes and it's kind of lost what it was about.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the first season was exactly, I was like, yeah, perfect. I got all the, memories that I needed. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. I just picked up my roller skates again recently, and I don't think I should be doing that as I'm aging. But I've got all the pads now, which is the difference from when I was a kid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a little more dangerous as a kid. So, well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
No problem. Yeah, thank you. Anytime. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_you. I'm Gordon Brickell. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to AJA.com for all your production and post-production needs.